Her billionaire husband promised her best friend everything, until she learned it wasn't his to give. Celia Marlowe had arranged the dining room so many times that her hands moved before she had decided what to think. A candle at the center of the long walnut table. Linen napkins folded loosely, never into the stiff shapes Adrian preferred when he invited people who treated a meal like a transaction. 6 chairs, one wide window holding the late gold of the city. Nothing in the room asked anyone to perform gratitude. Miriam Cole came in carrying a shallow wooden tray of serving spoons. At 55, Miriam had the calm habit of placing every object exactly where it belonged, even when the people around her had no such certainty. "You started without me," Miriam said. "I started before I could change my mind about the centerpiece." Celia adjusted a branch of rosemary. "It's a bad habit." "No, a bad habit is putting flowers between people who need to see each other." Miriam set the tray down and moved the rosemary to the sideboard. "Now they can see each other." Celia smiled, grateful for the ordinary correction. The dinner circle had begun years earlier, with just Celia and Miriam at a small table in the kitchen. It had grown slowly, not through announcements or membership fees, but through people deciding they wanted one evening a month where no one had to turn her life into a pitch. Celia protected the room by asking less of it, not more. The front door opened before either woman heard the bell. Nora Vale crossed the threshold with the familiarity of someone who had spent a decade being told she never needed to knock. Her coat was the color of winter cream, and she carried a slim box tied with blue ribbon. Behind her came Adrian, his phone in one hand, his attention divided between the screen and Nora's pleased expression. "I know I'm early," Nora said, "but I wanted Celia to see these before everyone settles in." She placed the box beside the plates and lifted the lid. Inside were 5 ivory cards, each printed with the same elegant phrase, asterisk hosted by Nora Vale. Asterisk. For a second, Celia thought the room had grown quieter because Miriam had stopped breathing. Then Nora lifted one of the cards, as though it were an invitation to a future already agreed upon. "Adrian said I could start easing into it," Nora said. "Not all at once. I thought I'd take the spring dinners first." Adrian looked up from his phone at last. "Nora has good instincts. You have been doing this for years, Celia. It might be nice to let someone else carry some of it." The words were gentle enough to pass for concern. That was what made them dangerous. Adrian had learned long ago that he could make a decision sound like a favor if he lowered his voice. Celia touched the edge of the box. She could have asked Nora whether she had ordered the cards before or after Adrian had made his promise. She could have asked Adrian why he had not spoken to her first. Instead, she closed the lid. "I'm glad you brought them to me," she said. Nora's smile widened. "I knew you'd understand. I understand that you expect something to happen tonight." Celia kept her hand on the box. "It will not." Adrian's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Celia, this circle does not have a host position you can offer on my behalf." She looked at Nora, not at him. "And it does not become someone else's, because my husband believes a change would be convenient." Nora's fingers closed around the printed card. "He said you wanted to step back." "I said I wanted the evenings to remain honest," Celia replied. "That is different." Miriam picked up the box and carried it to the sideboard, giving the small action the dignity of a decision rather than a punishment. Adrian slipped his phone into his pocket. "We are talking about a few dinners," he said. "No one is losing anything." Celia met his gaze. "You have already told Nora she is gaining something that belongs to the people who chose to build it with me." The clock in the hall marked the quarter hour. Nora stood beside the table, with one ivory card still in her hand, no longer looking like a guest who had arrived early. She looked like a woman who had discovered that a promise could have weight only on one side. Celia turned back to the place settings. She did not remove Nora's chair. She did not remove Adrian's either. But as she straightened the napkin at her own place, she knew the evening had changed. The question was no longer how to make everyone comfortable. The question was, who had the right to decide what this room meant? If you believe love, friendship, and money should never give one person the right to decide another person's future, subscribe and tell us where you are watching from today. because Celia was about to discover that Adrian's promise to Nora went much deeper than one dinner. By the time Nora had gone upstairs to take off her coat, Adrian had retreated to the study, with the air of a man waiting for a misunderstanding to resolve itself around him. Celia remained in the dining room, rubbing a thumb over the smooth lid of the ivory card box. Miriam was rinsing herbs at the sink, though the rosemary had already been washed. She asked me yesterday which conversations were most useful, Miriam said, without looking up. Celia turned. Nora did. Miriam nodded. She said Adrian told her she would be taking a larger role. She wanted to know who had been looking for partnerships, who had recently changed direction, who might need introductions. The questions were ordinary on their surface. In this room, they were not. The dinner circle worked because people decided for themselves when a private concern could become a conversation. Celia had never kept a ledger of need. Miriam had never treated one woman's uncertainty as another woman's opportunity. What did you tell her? Celia asked. That I do not speak for people who are not in the room. Miriam dried her hands on a towel. Then I told her she should ask you. Celia felt a brief, sharp gratitude. Thank you. You should not have needed that answer from me. Miriam's voice remained gentle. But I wanted you to know before the evening began. Celia carried the box to the study. Adrian was standing at the window, looking down at the traffic, as though the city had invited him to judge its pace. He turned when she entered, a patient smile already arranged on his face. Nora is sensitive, he said. Try not to make this bigger than it needs to be. You told her she could take over the circle. I told her you were tired. Those are not the same sentence. Adrian exhaled and moved toward the desk. Celia, you have been carrying every detail for years. Nora has been looking for a place where she can contribute. I made an offer that would help both of you. An offer of what? A chance, access, a beginning. None of those are yours to hand out. His smile disappeared. You make it sound as if I sold her the house. You offered her the trust of people you have not sat with when they were unsure. You offered her introductions you did not earn. You offered her my agreement without asking whether I had won. Adrian leaned against the desk, more irritated now than concerned. My support helped make these dinners possible. Your support paid for food and rent when I accepted it. It did not purchase the right to decide who belongs here. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Celia had known Adrian long enough to recognize the turn in his silence. He was searching for the version of the story that would make her seem unreasonable. Nora needs a real role, he said at last. She cannot spend her whole life being your friend in the corner of the room. The sentence landed harder than Celia expected. Not because it was entirely false. Nora had often made herself smaller around Celia's certainty, then blamed Celia for being visible. But Adrian had used that ache like a key. Nora deserves a role she can build honestly, Celia said. That does not make this one available. So you are saying no. I am saying no to you deciding for all of us. He looked past her toward the dining room. And what do you intend to do tonight? Announce that I have committed some offense? No. Celia surprised herself with the steadiness in her voice. I intend to keep the dinner. I will not turn Nora into an example. I will not turn you into one either. Then why not let it go? Because letting it go would make your promise real. She set the ivory card box on the desk between them. Adrian looked down at it, then back at her. The cards no longer appeared elegant. They looked flimsy, small enough to be carried by a man who had mistaken a room full of voluntary relationships for an asset with his name on it. When Celia left the study, Miriam was waiting in the hall. What do you need? Miriam asked. Celia looked toward the dining room, where the 6 chairs waited in the fading light. A way for everyone to speak only for herself. Miriam considered that. Then she nodded once. We can make that the evening. It was not a dramatic plan. It offered no easy release. But Celia felt the first movement of relief as they began to change the table from a place where someone could be presented into a place where every person would have to arrive by her own choice. Celia found Nora in the sunroom an hour later, standing beside the long shelves, where Celia kept bowls made by artists who had once come to the dinner with nothing but an idea and a nervous laugh. Nora had removed her coat. Her shoulders were rigid beneath a pale silk blouse, and the blue ribbon from the card box was looped around one wrist. "You could have told me before I ordered them," Nora said. "I did not know you were ordering them. Adrian said you had talked about taking a step back." "I said I wanted the circle to keep growing, without becoming a performance." Celia folded her hands in front of her. "He changed that into something else." Nora gave a short laugh that did not hold amusement. "He did not have to work very hard to change it. You have always had the circle. People listen when you ask a question. They return your calls. They treat you as if you have already decided what matters." Celia let the words settle. In their 20s, Nora had been the person who could make any room lighter. Celia had relied on that brightness without considering what Nora did after the room emptied. Over the years, their friendship had acquired an imbalance neither woman had named. Adrian had noticed it. He had found the quiet seam and pulled it open. "Do you think I wanted you to feel invisible?" Celia asked. Nora looked at the bowls instead of at her. "I think you never had to ask. Then I should have asked." That answer made Nora turn. She had been prepared for Celia to deny the hurt, or to make Nora defend it. The simple admission left them both, without the familiar argument. "But this is not a gift you can accept from Adrian," Celia continued. "Not because you are incapable, because he promised you something he cannot give. He said you would be relieved. He said what would make his plan easy." Nora's mouth tightened. "And you want me to sit at dinner tonight, while everyone realizes I believed him?" "I want you to sit at dinner only, if you can sit as yourself." "What does that mean?" "It means I will not ask you to apologize for wanting work that matters. I will not tell anyone your private reasons for wanting it. But I will not introduce you as my successor, and I will not let Adrian introduce you as something the circle has already chosen." Nora looked down at the ribbon on her wrist. "So I have a chair, but no future. You have a future you can build without borrowing mine." The sentence was quieter than Celia intended. It still changed the air between them. Nora reached for a bowl, then stopped before touching it. "You make that sound generous," she said. "It is not generosity. It is the only honest thing I have." For several seconds, Nora said nothing. Then she loosened the ribbon and laid it on the shelf. "I am coming to dinner," she said. "I want to hear what he says." Celia nodded. "So do I. And if he says you agreed, then I will tell the truth." Nora looked at her, with a mixture of anger and relief that Celia could not yet read. "You know this changes us." "Yes. You are not even going to promise it will be all right." Celia thought of the ivory cards, of Adrian making a private arrangement sound settled, of all the times she had rushed to soften a difficult moment before anyone else had to live through it. "No," she said. "I am not going to promise what I cannot give." Nora absorbed that, and her eyes flickered toward the dining room. The 6 chairs were still visible through the open doorway. One belonged to Celia. One belonged to Nora. Neither chair could repair the friendship by itself. "Then I will be there," Nora said again, this time without certainty. When she walked away, Celia remained in the sunroom alone. She did not feel victorious. She felt newly responsible for the truth she had chosen. It would have been easier to tell Nora that Adrian had made the whole problem. It would have been easier to make herself innocent. Instead, she picked up the blue ribbon and placed it in the closed box. There would be no new title at her table tonight. There would only be the difficult work of letting each person speak in her own name. Adrian was waiting in the kitchen when Celia returned from the sunroom. He had loosened his tie and poured himself water, as if he had spent the afternoon solving a problem no one else understood. The dinner dishes were warming in the oven. Miriam stood at the counter arranging pear slices with deliberate attention, giving the room the courtesy of not pretending she could not hear. "Nora told me you had a conversation," Adrian said. "We did. She is upset. So am I." He set down his glass. "Then perhaps we should stop adding to it. Introduce her tonight. Let her learn the rhythm of the circle. You can decide later what responsibilities make sense." Celia looked at him. "You have already decided what makes sense. That is the problem. I am trying to create room for someone you claim to care about. You are trying to make me confirm a promise you made without me." Adrian's expression hardened, not with anger exactly, but with the impatience of someone whose usual method had failed. "You built this circle with my support. You invited people into our home. You cannot act as though I have no relationship to it. You have a relationship to me, Celia said. You do not have a claim on every relationship I have nurtured. Miriam rested her hand on the counter. The evening is not a business asset, Adrian. He glanced at her, surprised that she had spoken. No one said it was. You did, in different words. Adrian drew himself up. I have made room for Celia to do meaningful work. I have paid for this room, the food, the staff, the comfort of it. If Nora can carry some of it, why is that an insult? The list was familiar. Adrian had always been generous in visible ways. His generosity became difficult only when it expected to be remembered as authority. Because you are not offering to help Nora build her own circle, Celia said. You are offering her mine. You are also asking me to make that look kind. He stared at her, then shifted his gaze toward the dining room. What is your alternative? You are going to make everyone sit through a tense dinner because you need to make a point? No, I am going to make the dinner truthful. That phrase is becoming tiresome. Then you should have chosen an easier truth. Miriam's hand paused over the pear slices. Adrian gave a small, disbelieving shake of his head. You are changing the rules because you do not want Nora near what you built, he said. Celia felt the old instinct to defend herself rise again. She could have explained every invitation, every late night, every time she had chosen the circle, over an evening Adrian wanted to impress someone. But explanation would only invite him to grade her work. I am changing the rules because I should have made them clearer long ago, she said. No one speaks for another person here. No one receives a role because a spouse, a friend, or a donor says she should. And you think that will leave Nora with dignity? That depends on whether we let her have her own voice. Adrian stepped closer to the island. You are risking a great deal over dinner. I am risking a version of peace that only works when I agree to disappear. The words surprised even Celia. Miriam looked at her with an expression that was not praise, exactly. It was recognition. Adrian turned away first. Do what you want. I will, Celia said. He left the kitchen, and the room seemed to release a breath. Miriam slid the pears into a serving bowl. You know he will say you embarrassed him, she said. He may. And Nora may say the same. She may. Miriam picked up a small stack of blank cards from a drawer. Then let us give everyone the same place to begin. Together they carried 5 blank cards into the dining room. On each one, Miriam wrote 3 prompts in plain ink. What do I seek? What can I offer? What may I choose for myself? Celia placed 1 card at each of the 5 seats that would be occupied that evening. The 6th chair remained empty. It was not reserved for Nora. It was not reserved for Adrian. It was not a prize waiting to be claimed. It was simply empty, a reminder that no place at the table existed until someone chose it freely and the table chose her back. Elias Grant arrived just before dusk, carrying no briefcase and no expression of professional ceremony. At 59, he had the restrained manner of a man who understood that people often asked for mediation when they had already said the important things badly. Celia had met him years earlier, through Miriam, but this was the first time she had invited him into the dinner circle. He stood at the threshold of the dining room and took in the 5 place settings, the blank cards, and the 6th chair left deliberately unassigned at the end of the table. You have made the evening very clear, he said. I hope so, Celia replied. I do not want it to become a hearing. Then do not ask anyone to defend a private history. Ask what each person is prepared to choose in the present. Miriam placed a cup of tea near him. That is the intention. Elias sat beside the sideboard, not at the table. Celia had asked him to hold the structure, not to resolve the relationship for her. He read the prompts once, then set the card down. Who was expected to speak, he asked. Celia, Adrian, Nora, Miriam, and you, Miriam said. No one else. Good. Then the room is small enough for accuracy. Celia appreciated the word. Accuracy was different from victory. It required her to say only what she knew, and to leave room for what she did not. Nora appeared in the doorway wearing a dark green dress that Celia had seen her wear at happier dinners. She noticed Elias, then the cards. You invited a mediator, Nora said. I invited Elias to make sure the rules are fair, Celia answered. He will not decide anyone's future. Nora crossed to the table. Her eyes stopped at the unassigned chair. Is that supposed to be mine? No, Celia said. It belongs to no one. Nora gave a tired smile. That is almost worse. I know. For a moment, they stood on opposite sides of the table. Celia wanted to reach across it and restore the ease they had known before Adrian's promise came into the open. But ease built on a silence was not the same thing as trust. I did not know he had never asked you, Nora said. You knew he was telling you what I would do. Nora looked down. Yes. Why did you believe him? The question was not sharp. That made it harder to answer. Because he spoke, as if he had seen me, Nora said. Not as your friend. Not as someone people bring along. Because she is pleasant. He said I could make the circle bigger. He said you would understand. Celia felt the old affection and the new grief move through her at once. I do understand wanting to be seen. I will not pretend that makes his promise valid. Nora nodded slowly. I do not want to be seated like a mistake. Then do not be, Celia said. Sit as Nora. Say what you want. Let the answer be real. Adrian entered before Nora could respond. He had changed jackets, as if a cleaner line across his shoulders could restore control. He took in Elias, the cards, and the chair, without a place card. This is excessive, he said. Elias rose. I am here only to ensure that each adult speaks for themselves, and that no one is assigned a decision they did not make. Adrian's eyes narrowed. I am not assigning decisions. Celia met his gaze. Then this should be easy. Miriam lit the candle. The small flame multiplied across the darkening window, until the room seemed to hold more light than Celia expected. She took her seat. Nora sat across from her. Adrian chose the chair beside Nora, but did not touch her hand. Elias remained near the sideboard, ready to listen. The first dinner under the new rules had not yet begun. Still, Celia could feel its central fact taking shape. Adrian had arrived believing he could give Nora everything. Tonight, every person in the room would have to decide what she was willing to give for herself. By the time everyone settled fully into the evening, the candle had burned lower. Miriam sat to her left, with the bowl of pears between them. Nora sat across from Celia, her hands folded over the blank card Miriam had placed there. Adrian chose the chair beside Nora. Elias took the final place at the far end of the table, close enough to hear every word, and far enough not to become the center of it. No one reached for the food. Before we begin, Nora said, I prepared something. She opened the small envelope she had brought with her. Celia recognized the same ivory paper from the cards. Nora glanced at Adrian, and he gave the smallest nod. It is only an introduction, he said. There is no reason to make this difficult. Nora drew out a single page. Her voice was steady when she started. For the past several years, Celia has created a remarkable space, and I am honored to continue. Nora, Celia said. Nora stopped. The interruption was soft, but the room could not mistake it for permission. Please do not read that as an announcement, Celia continued. Not tonight. Color rose in Nora's face. You said I could speak for myself. You can. But that page says this circle has chosen you. It has not. Adrian put his palm on the table. Celia, this is exactly what I hoped we could avoid. Nora is trying to offer something gracious. She is reading a role you offered, Celia said. Those are different things. Nora lowered the page. So I am supposed to sit here and pretend I did not expect any of this? No, Celia said. You are supposed to be able to say what you expected and why. That is more honest than pretending. Elias looked from one face to another. May I suggest a simple beginning? Adrian's jaw tightened. This is a dinner, not a process. It can be both, if everyone agrees, Elias replied. No one will be required to tell a story they do not wish to tell. Each person may answer 3 questions: what they seek, what they can offer, and what they choose for themselves. No one answers for anyone else. Miriam slid the blank cards closer to the center of the table. That is the format Celia and I prepared. Adrian looked at Celia. You prepared this before we arrived. I prepared it after I learned you had made plans in my name. His expression changed. It was not surprise. It was the recognition that she had stopped asking him to soften the consequences of what he had done. Nora folded the ivory page once, then again. She did not destroy it or push it away. She set it beside her plate, as evidence of how certain she had been only a few minutes earlier. "I do not want to be treated like an intruder," she said. "You are not an intruder," Celia answered. "You are my friend. You are also an adult who deserves an answer that is true. And if the answer is no, then it is no to a promise Adrian made. It is not no to every possible place you might make for yourself." Nora looked toward Adrian. "Did you tell her I had already agreed?" He held her gaze for a moment. "I told her you were ready. That is not what I asked." The words were quiet, but they shifted something that had been leaning entirely in Adrian's favor. Miriam did not rescue the silence. Elias did not fill it. Celia let Nora have it. At last Adrian said, "I thought she would be pleased." "You thought she would manage it," Celia said. Nora's hand closed over the folded page. "I will not read this," she said. "But I am staying." Celia nodded. "Then stay as Nora." The 5 cards remained blank. The dinner had not yet started, yet the old arrangement had already failed. Adrian could no longer place Nora at the center and expect Celia to provide the words. For the first time, that evening, each person at the table had to decide what could honestly be claimed in their own name. Adrian left the dining room before the first course was served. Celia found him on the back terrace, standing beneath the small string lights that Miriam had insisted made the garden less solemn. The city sounded distant beyond the wall. Inside, she could hear the faint movement of plates as Miriam gave Nora and Elias a moment alone. "You have made your point," Adrian said, when Celia stepped outside. "I have not begun to make it." He turned toward her. "You have brought Elias into our home. You have made Nora doubt a chance I wanted to give her, all over a dinner circle. Not over a dinner circle. Over you deciding that my work, my friendships, and my agreement were all available for you to offer. I wanted to help Nora, then help Nora build something she can call her own." Adrian laughed once, without warmth. "With what? Her own resources? Her own contacts? You know she does not have the reach for it. Neither did I when I began. You had me." Celia looked at him for a long moment. "I had myself. I accepted support from you. I am grateful for what was freely given. But you have rewritten that support until it sounds as if every decision I made was yours." The terrace lights flickered in the breeze. Adrian's face softened in the way it always did before he asked her to repair something for him. "I am not trying to control you," he said. "I am trying to keep this from becoming a mess. Let Nora take the lead for a season. Let everyone think it was your idea. We can work out the details afterward." Celia heard the old invitation inside the sentence. Make the moment smooth now, and perhaps later he would remember to ask what it cost her. She had accepted that invitation too many times. "There are no details afterward," she said. "There is only the fact that you promised a position that was never yours." Adrian's patience fell away. "If you cannot see what I have done for this circle, perhaps I should stop paying for it." The words hung between them, plain at last. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He expected the possibility of a smaller future to make her return to the old one. Celia felt the fear of it. The dinners had a budget. The room had costs. Miriam had spent years making every evening feel possible, without making anyone feel purchased. Losing Adrian's contribution would change things. It would not change who was allowed to decide. "Then it will be smaller," Celia said. His eyes narrowed. "You would give up all of that." "I would give up a version of it. That comes with your permission attached." "That is dramatic." "No, it is practical. Miriam and I will work with what the circle can truly sustain." "You are choosing less." "I am choosing what is real." For a moment Adrian looked almost bewildered. Adrian had always understood money as an answer to discomfort. A better room, a larger table, a generous gesture made quickly enough to end a difficult conversation. Tonight Celia saw its limit. His money could pay for the room. It could not purchase the trust inside it. When she went back inside, Miriam was standing near the sideboard. Elias had written nothing on his card. Nora was staring at hers, as though the 3 questions had become more demanding than any prepared speech. "He may withdraw the annual contribution," Celia said. Miriam's face changed, but she did not look away. "Then we plan without it." Elias nodded. A smaller structure can still be a clear one. If the circle continues, it should be, because the people in it know what they are choosing. Nora looked up. You would rather lose the money than let me try? I would rather you try in a way that is yours, Celia said. I will not build your beginning on a promise. That makes all of us smaller. Nora's eyes filled, but she did not turn away. I do not know how to begin without someone opening the door. Celia touched the back of an empty chair. Then begin by asking whether the door is open. The room was quieter after that. Not peaceful yet, but clear. And clarity, Celia understood, was the first resource Adrian could not take back. When Adrian returned to the table, he did not apologize. Celia had not expected him to. He sat down slowly, his hands empty, his expression composed in the careful way she had once mistaken for calm. Nora looked at him, then at Celia. Miriam poured water into each glass. Elias waited until everyone had settled before he spoke. We can stop here, he said, or we can use the questions on the cards. No one is required to agree with anyone else. The only rule is that each person speaks from personal knowledge and only for the choices that belong to them. I want to continue, Nora said. Celia nodded. So do I. Adrian gave a restrained shrug. Fine. Miriam turned her card over first. What I seek is a circle where people can ask for help without becoming a project for someone else. What I can offer is care with the boundaries intact. What I choose is not to share another person's private hopes, as though they are a list to be inherited. Her words were simple. They did not accuse. Still, Adrian shifted in his chair. Elias followed. What I seek is accuracy. What I can offer is a structure that makes room for consent. What I choose is to remind everyone here that an introduction is not ownership and a contribution is not authority over another adult. Celia felt the room turn toward her. For years she had opened dinners by asking other people what they wanted. Tonight she had to answer the question herself. What I seek, she said, is a way to continue this work without pretending that love, friendship, or money gives one person the right to decide for another. What I can offer is the circle I have helped build, but only with honest invitations. What I choose is not to make Nora the face of something that has not chosen her, and not to let Adrian speak as though my answer was already his. Nora's fingers pressed against the edge of her card. What I seek is a life that does not feel borrowed, she said. I wanted the dinners because I have watched Celia make people feel welcome, and I wanted to matter in that way. What I can offer is my own effort, if anyone here is willing to see it. What I choose is not to accept a title that comes from a conversation I was not part of. Her voice caught on the final words, but she finished them. Celia did not reach across the table. Nora had asked to be seen as herself. Letting her complete the sentence was part of seeing her. Adrian looked at the blank card in front of him. What I seek is for this family not to fracture over a misunderstanding. Was it a misunderstanding? Elias asked. Adrian looked up, annoyed. I believed I could support my wife's work and help Nora find a meaningful place in it. Did Celia authorize you to offer Nora leadership? The question was not theatrical. That made Adrian's pause impossible to hide behind. No, he said finally. Not in those words. Did Nora understand that? Elias asked. Nora shook her head. No. Adrian's shoulders lowered a fraction. I thought my support meant I had some say. You have a voice, Celia said. You do not have my voice. Miriam placed her card flat on the table. The circle can have a future without a successor. We can rotate who welcomes the room. We can make every introduction voluntary. We can make the season fit the resources that arrive without conditions. Nora looked at Celia. Would I be allowed to take part in that? You would be allowed to ask, Celia said. And to offer something true. The rest must be chosen together. Adrian gave a quiet exhale. So I lose the ability to help? You lose the ability to decide what your help buys, Celia replied. No one spoke for a while. Then Nora took the ivory page from beside her plate and placed it in the center of the table. Not as a confession, not as an object for anyone to judge, simply as the plan they would not carry forward. Miriam picked up the blank cards. Then let us begin again, she said. One by one, the 5 adults wrote their names beneath the 3 questions. The dinner had not erased what Adrian had done or what Nora had hoped for. It had made those things visible without turning either person into a spectacle. In that visibility, Adrian's promise finally lost its power. It could not survive a room where every person had chosen to speak in their own name. The dishes remained on the table long after the food had gone cold. Miriam carried the plates to the kitchen in small, quiet trips. Elias stood near the window, giving Celia and Nora space, without leaving the house entirely. Adrian had moved into the hall, where his coat hung beside the front door, as though he had already placed himself outside the evening. Nora was the first to speak. "I do not know what happens to us now," she said. Celia looked at the folded ivory page in the center of the table. "Neither do I. That is not very comforting. It is not meant to be cruel. I know." Nora sat back in her chair. "I keep thinking that if I had asked you one question, this would not have happened. It still would have mattered that Adrian offered it, but I wanted him to be right." Celia heard no self-pity in the admission. Only exhaustion. Nora had wanted the circle because she wanted a place with weight, and Adrian had made that desire sound like an invitation. Celia could see the part she had played in never asking Nora what kind of work she wished to build. She could not use that regret to make an untrue promise now. "If you want to return one day," Celia said, "it cannot be as my replacement, and it cannot be as Adrian's choice. It would have to be as Nora, offering something that is yours." Nora nodded slowly. "Then I should not return next month." "That is your decision." "It is." Nora stood, gathering her coat. At the doorway she paused. "I am sorry I let myself believe his promise meant I was owed what you built. I am sorry I did not see sooner how often you felt you had to borrow someone else's place to be seen." Nora looked back at her. Neither woman smiled, but the silence between them had changed. It was no longer a silence purchased by politeness. It held the possibility of a future neither of them could name yet. After Nora left, Adrian came back into the dining room. He had heard enough to know that Celia had not ordered Nora away. His face carried a strange mixture of relief and disappointment. "I can keep the funding in place," he said. "I do not want the circle to suffer because we handled this badly." "What would you want in return?" Celia asked. "Nothing." She waited. Adrian looked toward the empty chair. "I would like us to stop treating this as proof that I am some kind of villain. I have not called you that." "Then what do you want?" "For you to understand that money does not turn a private choice into a shared one. For you to stop presenting my work as something you can distribute. For you to let the circle decide whether it needs your contribution." He stared at her. "You would put a donation up for discussion?" "Yes." "That is humiliating. It is transparent." Adrian looked away. Celia knew he would dislike the distinction. Transparency meant he could offer support, but not attach an invisible instruction to it. It meant he would have to live with a response that was not arranged for him in advance. Miriam returned to the doorway, drying her hands. "We can make a smaller season," she said. "We can decide later whether outside support belongs in it." Elias joined them. "Then make the next conversation follow the same rules." Celia nodded. She did not ask Adrian to leave. She did not ask him to promise anything. She simply picked up the ivory card box from the sideboard and handed it to him. "These belong to the plan you made," she said. "I am not carrying them for you." Adrian accepted the box. It was light in his hands, yet for the first time, it seemed to cost him something to hold it. 6 weeks later, the dining room looked almost the same and nothing like it had before. The walnut table was still there. Miriam had still placed the rosemary to one side, so no one's face was hidden. The candles were shorter, the meal was simpler, and only 4 places had been set for that evening. Celia stood at the window, with a folded note from Nora in her hand. Nora had written that she was not ready to return, but that she had begun meeting with Miriam to learn how to create a small gathering of her own. She had not asked Celia to approve it. She had only said she wanted to make something that did not depend on anyone else's promise. It was not forgiveness. It was a beginning. Miriam entered carrying a bowl of bread. "You do not have to save a place for her." "I know." Celia put the note away. "I am not." At the table, Elias unfolded a single sheet of paper. He had helped Celia and Miriam write a plain stewardship agreement for the dinner circle. Every invitation voluntary, every introduction consented to, every contribution named, without hidden expectations. The document was not grand. It could not repair a marriage or restore a friendship. It simply gave the work a structure that no longer depended on unspoken permission. Does this reflect the rules you chose? Elias asked. Yes, Celia said. Then my work is finished. He placed the paper in front of her, rose, and picked up his coat. Miriam thanked him. Celia did too. Elias gave a small nod and left them with the quiet authority of someone who understood when not to remain in another person's story. Adrian arrived a few minutes later, not through the front door, but from the hallway that connected the house to the garage. He had not been invited to sit at the table. Celia had told him he could come only to deliver the final statement about his contribution, and only if he could do it, without trying to direct the evening. He held a small envelope in both hands. I have decided not to continue the funding, he said. Celia felt the old knot in her chest, then watched it loosen. Thank you for being clear. He seemed surprised by the answer. I thought you might argue. I do not need to. Miriam said you have already adjusted the season. We have. Adrian looked at the foreplay settings. It is smaller. It is honest. For a moment he stood there, with the envelope, perhaps waiting for her to ask him to reconsider. Celia did not. She had spent too many years turning his hesitation into a request she was supposed to fulfill. I was wrong about the circle, he said at last, and about what I could offer Nora. Celia looked at him. The words were not enough to repair the marriage. They did not erase the decision he had made, or the labor he had treated as his to use. But they were his words, spoken without a script for her to complete. Yes, she said. You were. He nodded and left the envelope on the sideboard. When the door closed, Celia did not chase after him. She returned to the table. Miriam poured water into 2 glasses. Are you ready? Celia looked at the empty chair at the end of the table. It was still unassigned. It no longer felt like a warning. It felt like an honest fact. No place was owed. No role was waiting to be handed from one person to another, and the room could remain open without becoming available to anyone who claimed it. She opened the dining room door. The rosemary caught the warm air from the hall. Celia sat beside Miriam, placed the stewardship agreement between them, and began the evening by saying the only welcome she trusted now. You are here because you chose to be. This story is a fictional dramatization created for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real people, companies, or events is purely coincidental.